The doctor I worked for paid hundreds of dollars to eat dinner leftovers. I worked for an orthopedic surgeon who constantly ate people's lunches and would leave $10 on the fridge. He really loved leftover home-cooked meals. I don't get lunches off, I have to work to keep paying your salary. You can go buy another lunch, he would say. I hated him so much, but I got paid a lot. He was fresh out of his internship and residency, and he thought he was above everyone. We complained to the office manager. She went to the doctor and said we were all pissed about it. The doctor told her to deal with it. If the doctor decided to eat one of our lunches, we could have the office manager just order us something. This was amazing. There were 2 people besides me that had family and kids, so we always brought leftovers. If he ate my food, I ordered from the most expensive steak place in town. Appetizers, 22 oz steak, 3 sides, a salad, and dessert. I'd eat the salad, and the rest went home. And of course, there are plenty of leftovers to take to work the next day. The rest of the staff was doing the same. Ordering full chickens, 4 to 5 different Chinese dishes, spending hundreds of dollars to replace stolen meatloaf sandwiches and day-old soups and spaghetti. The office manager went along with it. After all, he said we could order what we wanted if he took our lunch. It went on for 2 months until Ickhead Doc Cotton. From then on, he had the office manager order him a lunch. I did miss trading off a cold pork chop and Spanish rice for prime rib and all the fixings. I posted this as a comment on our Ask Reddit, but Aussie typed it out. I decided it belonged here. I complied and cost my boss his bonus and his job. I'm a corporate professional in middle management. My boss is a senior manager, and he's horrible at this job. Peter principle totally applies. He got his annual goals sent down from the corporate ether, and naturally, he added these things to my list of responsibilities. He would receive a hefty bonus for completing them. I would receive none. He would take all the credit, and tell me I was lucky to have him as a mentor. He had this big shot personality. He was a smooth talker that acted like a celebrity, and he was just too important to be bothered by the people lower on the totem pole. He only wanted to interact with people he could brag about, and beyond puckering tokus their behinds, he spent most of his time at work perusing dating apps. We were a very in-demand group within the company, and we had a revolving door of people coming to our area daily to get help from us. Non-management employees weren't allowed to have cell phones and didn't have access to email, so stopping in was their only option. My boss got furious if I wasn't in my office to catch all the traffic. Completing his goals for him required me to be out of my office. He demanded that I stay in my office for my full shift every single day and accused me of leaving the property and stealing company time because, if I wasn't in my office, how would he know I was working? So I complied. I stayed in my office. When Heist's annual review came up, he lost his bonus. Because didn't meet a single goal for the entire year. He fell under intense scrutiny. It was found Thathe was using company funds and resources to take these dating app encounters to expensive places, and was expensing it as work-related. He also used company funds that were meant for a building upgrade to build a new patio at his house. He asked the contractor, a friend of his, to just do the work and find a way to add the money into the company bill. He was promptly fired. We have to use weed killer on our lawn? Fine. We've lived in this neighborhood for 15 years now, and the wall board, like many, is mostly made up of the grouchy old people who have too much time on their hands. Sometimes it's fine for a while and then someone new takes over and has some vendetta to pursue. I guess we were due for the pendulum to swing. Our front yard has a few big trees and is thus entirely in the shade. We've tried to plant grass seed a few times, but there's just not enough sun for grass to thrive, so it's mostly low ground cover. No idea what kind, but it's green and we keep it mowed. For 13 years this was fine. Then last year, we got a nasty gram from the wall. We had weeds. According to the bylaws, we needed to prove we were using chemical lawn treatments to kill anything that's not grass. Crucially, the rules don't require us to hire a weed control company, although that's what they expected. We just had to provide proof in the form of a receipt for money spent. My lovely, petty spouse went on Amazon and ordered a $6 spray bottle of the most woo-woo new age homeopathic weed killer she could find. I think the main ingredient was lavender oil. We dutifully spritzed the yard a few times, sent an action shot and a copy of the digital receipt, and thanked them for their concern. The lavender oil, shockingly, did nothing. We didn't actually have to kill the weeds, though. Just try. We've heard nothing from the wall since, and the front yard still has almost no grass. My sister wanted to eat like a dog, so our mom made her eat like our dog. My sister was obsessed with 101 Dalmatians and decided that from the moment the film finished, the only way she was going to eat was like a dog. When I say she ate like a dog, I don't only mean that she lapped up her food with her tongue, but also Thatch would not use any tables or cutlery and would only eat off the floor, couch, or anywhere else our dog felt appropriate eating. My mom spent days convincing her that this was a terrible idea, telling her that she should eat at the table with the rest of the family. Eventually, my mom got sick of this and made a plan. If my sister wanted to eat like a dog, then she was going to really eat like a dog, and I'm sure you can see where this is going. My mom decided that my sister was now only going to be fed dog biscuits for every meal until she figured out that being a dog wasn't all it was cracked up to be, and to my sister's credit, she really managed to hold out for a lot longer than I expected for an 8-year-old. She held out for a solid day and a half before she decided that she couldn't do it anymore. And #X200B. Anyways, her favorite movie is Aladdin now. Need me to stay back and cover a shift? This will cost you big time. This comes from about 15 plus years ago, when I was, and still am, working with people with disabilities in a community home. It's a great job for those who like it, a terrible one for those who don't, meaning that any staff you meet are either very new, or long-term like myself. As a consequence, the turnover rate of staff is high, and replacement staff are slow to be hired. Meaning, you often find shifts not covered straight away. This is an industry where simply not having a shift filled isn't an option, particularly where I work, in a house with a single-day staff, and a single-night staff, each working 12 shifts on a 7-day spread over 2 weeks roster. There are some strict rules regarding hours you can work, intended to avoid burnout, but more used to keep a reign of overtime, which, in our industry, paid plus 70% your hourly rate for the first 3 hours above your 76-hour fortnightly maximum, and plus 100% for any time after that. You can't demand overtime, but if they require you to work longer, they can't not pay you overtime. Also worth noting is that the people we work with are vulnerable, meaning they cannot be left unsupervised. Long story short, you can't go home until your replacement arrives. So back in the early 2000s, we were having problems locating staff, lots of people working overtime, and a lot of fresh faces appearing and disappearing. The house I worked in wasn't difficult in particular for adults with intellectual disability, but there was no support, by which I mean the worker there had to fend for themselves. There was no supervisor in the next building, they were miles and miles away. I'd frequently at this time had to stay back half an hour, waiting for staff to come replace me. I was less than happy with the way it was handled. Each time I called the office to tell them night staff haven't arrived, do you know who's booked? To which I'd get the reply, we are still looking, how late can you stay? The obvious answer was, until I'm replaced, but what I often said was, I prefer not to stay after the end of my shift, but that doesn't seem to matter now, so I'll stay here until someone comes. Each time a new face arrived, I'd give them all the information they'd need for the shift, introduce them, walk them through their duties, etc. This would take 20 to 30 minutes. The point being is I don't just jump ship when a staff arrives to replace me. This is someone's home, and I like them, so I'm not going to leave them in the hands of someone uninformed. Cut to that weekend. My roster had me working 12-hour days, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Come Friday night, my replacement didn't arrive. I waited. I sent a text message to the supervisor after 15 minutes, then called after 30. Left a message, and when they eventually called back, I could tell they had not found a replacement. I told them I'd stay until they did. This was by that time, an hour after I was meant to finish. 10 p.m. Come 11, they call and say they simply can't find a replacement. They offer a deal, and say if I stay and do the night shift, I can take the next shift off. It's pretty even, so you won't miss out, they said. Then they changed their tone and said, it's not really a request, we have no other option. Treat this as a direction. I reminded them it was a passive house, meaning you got half the hourly rate from midnight, but you could sleep in the bed provided, so I'd actually be taking a pay cut. They didn't know what else they could do, so I made a suggestion. I'd stay and do the night shift, but I wasn't going to give up my next shift. I was going to do that one as well. They agreed. It meant they didn't need to find a replacement for me in the morning, so they thought it was a good deal for them. It was, however, an even better deal for me. It took a few emails over the weekend with the union to sort out the particulars, but what happened was this. Once I couldn't leave my worksite because of a lack of replacement, I was on overtime. As this overtime was because of direction, not voluntary, it remained in place until I went home. Because I didn't agree to drop my following day shift, my overtime continued till I ended on Saturday night. The upshot being that, working 36 hours in a row, resulted in the equivalent of 60 hours pay. I was the first person to, as they say, pull this stunt, and word got around that if you didn't get replaced, you were actually the person who was in a position of power. It didn't take long until the department put a little more effort into training and employing extra staff, so something like this never happened again. Not at least, to me. Complain to me pretending to be a patient's father? Well, let's involve her parents then. I used to work at a very nice private hospital where the place looked like a hotel, the food was great and the service unrivaled. We were voted best private hospital in the country quite a few times, and all around, people were happy and the care was great. The nurses were mostly old school, stern but very passionate about patient care, with no time for anything that stops them from doing their job. My job was to focus on marketing and complaints, and TBH, I didn't have a lot of work on the complaint side, but every now and again something would come up. If there was an incident, the RNs would usually come and warn me to expect something, and give their side of the story. One morning, as I got to work, a RN was waiting at my door to update me on an incident the previous night. There was a 18-year-old patient who had a small op, but was prone to dizziness and fainting. Now, slip and falls are a big thing in hospitals, and these incidents get monitored very closely. Since she was a slip and fall risk, they moved her to a private room right in front of the nurse's station so that she can be monitored throughout the day and night. One night, the tattoo-clad, older nurse's description, 20-something boyfriend comes to visit, and forgets that this is in fact a hospital and not a hotel. Old school, stern nurse realized something is amiss when the room's doors were closed and, after she pushed the door open, the curtains around the bed was drawn too. Seeing the privacy takes second priority to a patient's healing and safety in a hospital, old school nurse wasn't having any of this. She pulls the curtains open, pulls the boyfriend out of the hospital bed and gave them both a talking to. Tattoo boyfriend left soon afterwards, apparently furious that his evening was ruined. Sure enough, 2 hours after the nurse visited my office, I get a mail from patient's father, detailing how his daughter's privacy was invaded the previous night, how she had a private conversation with her boyfriend, and how they were unfairly treated by a nurse. I was surprised that an older gentleman would write an email to a hospital with so many spelling errors and complete lack of punctuation, but the email address, something like tattooguy@gmail.com, was a total giveaway as to who the real author was. Now, technically, I was just able to reply on the email, detailing our experience and side of the story. However, sharing private patient information on an email to an unconfirmed email address is bound to get me in serious trouble. So, I did what any sane, and perhaps slightly malicious, person would do. I called document control and asked them to pull the email address on file for me. This happened to belong to her mom. I forwarded the email to her, mentioning that I received the following email from her daughter's father, but since she is the contact person on file and we need to stick with the people that we have permission to contact, may she be as kind as to share our response with him? I then detailed what the nurse told me about the patient being a slip and fall risk that requires constant monitoring, about the boyfriend visiting, about the door and curtain being closed, and the nurse catching them in the hospital bed together. I apologized on behalf of the nurse for invading their privacy, but explained that open doors are protocol to ensure a patient's safety, and our main priority is getting a patient safe, healthy and back at home as soon as possible. I ended the mail with my contact details and invited her to contact me if she has any further questions. Well, if the parents didn't know about the incident, they knew now. I am told the daughter was well behaved for the remainder of the time, and the boyfriend didn't stop by once during the rest of the patient's stay. So, lessons learned. Don't include your parents' details on your hospital file as your main contact details if you don't want them contacted. Don't try and catfish a hospital employee, and respect a hospital for what it is, a place of healing and not a hotel. TLDR, 18-year-old and boyfriend were caught going at it in her hospital bed. Then boyfriend emails hospital to complain about incident, telling us he is the patient's father. We respond to his claims via the email address on file, which happened to belong to patient's mother. Whoops.